This is a case that police say is a, quote, profound betrayal. They say the smiling woman you see here advertised herself on Facebook as a babysitter, as the woman that as a parent you could trust to hold on to your child, even your newborn. But police say she's a killer. She's now charged with murder. Not only do police say that she killed a newborn in her care and almost got away with it, she's already in prison for nearly killing another baby. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. If you're a parent, you know that it takes a lot to trust a babysitter, to find the right babysitter, to look after your child, especially if we're talking about a newborn. When two moms saw on Facebook that Holly Sheppard was advertising her services, they decided that she was deserving of that trust. Sheppard has pictures on Facebook that show that she's a mom to multiple children. She has selfies in what looks like a hospital bathroom with scrubs, with a stethoscope around her neck, so you can see why she would be the type of person that you could trust with taking care of your baby. One of the babies we're about to talk about nearly died in Sheppard's care, and now police say another baby did lose their life at her hands. The story of Holly Sheppard becoming a parent's worst nightmare starts in 2018 in Oklahoma City. That is when a baby, just 22 days old, went to the hospital. Here's what a news reporter with KWTV said back in 2018.
Police say the infant had obvious signs of abuse.
Police said the baby had non-accidental abusive head trauma. The baby died days later, and at the time, police believed that the baby died from blunt force trauma to the head. The baby's mom said, according to local media, that she had left the baby in the care of a 21-year-old woman who she found on Facebook, a babysitter by the name of Holly Sheppard. But even though police were told that this was the person who was caring for this baby, she was never charged with the baby's death. Police say that they couldn't prove that Sheppard was actually taking care of that baby at the time that she was injured. No one was charged with the baby's death in 2018. Then we go 5 years later to 2023, still in Oklahoma, but now we're in Kay County, Oklahoma, which is roughly 2 hours north of OKC. It's near the Kansas border, more of a rural community. A baby there is rushed to the hospital, and we have the police report from 2023, and this is what police said. The 2-month-old, think about that, just 2 months old, a little girl, had skull fractures, and she was also suffering from seizures. The baby even had internal bleeding, according to doctors, in her brain. The babysitter, you guessed it, Holly Sheppard. The baby's mom found Sheppard in a very similar way to the mom in 2018 on a Facebook group where Sheppard was advertising herself as a babysitter. In this case, according to police, Sheppard did give 3 references, all of whom spoke highly of her babysitting skills, according to the statement that the 2-month-old's mom gave police. Before we get back to this story, I want to bring you a Law&Crime legal alert. If you received a Depo-Provera birth control shot and were later diagnosed with a brain or a spinal tumor called meningioma, you may be eligible for a lawsuit. Our partners at Morgan & Morgan are investigating claims that patients weren't properly warned about this risk. It's free to check, takes just a few minutes, and you don't pay unless they win. So you can scan the QR code on your screen right now or click the link in the description to this video. Also, head to www.forthepeople.com/LCDEPO to see if you qualify. Now, Sheppard was looking after the infant at her house. Police say Sheppard was the one to call 911 because the baby was having seizures. The 2-month-old was taken to a local hospital before being life-flighted to the same medical center in Oklahoma City where the baby who died in 2018 was brought to. The baby's mom said that Sheppard called her and didn't tell her anything had happened. According to the mom's statement, she sent her mother-in-law to then pick up her 4-year-old daughter who was also being looked after at Sheppard's house. And that 4-year-old told her mother-in-law, quote, "The couch hit KB." KB is the baby's initials. The mother-in-law then said that when Holly was told that the baby was being life-flighted, she was, quote, "completely straight-faced." Police then talked to Holly, and she reportedly gave multiple changing stories about what happened. One being that she put the baby in the crib, left the room, and then she heard a scream and found the baby having seizures. The second story she reportedly told police was that she tripped on her son's toy and she fell while she was carrying the baby. She then also told police that she dropped the baby twice. At her house, police reportedly had Holly reenact how she fell, and she allegedly continued to lie about what happened. The injuries to the child's head had doctors believing that something had hit the child's head. Holly Sheppard was arrested. She pled guilty in connection to that 2-month-old's injuries in 2024, and she received a life sentence with the chance of release after 25 years. So she's in custody of the state of Oklahoma right now. But this story is far from over. The baby, which Holly said she dropped, survived. I want to tell you that. It's an important part of this story, that baby lived, but she is still recovering. Here's a picture of her from a Facebook group on her second birthday. Now, after Holly's conviction in that case, police in Oklahoma City reopened the murder investigation of the 22-day-old baby who died in 2018. According to KOKH TV, police found enough similarities between what happened in Kay County in 2023 to what happened to the baby who died in 2018 to link Sheppard to that case. This month, Holly Sheppard was charged with the murder of that baby. Social media always leaves a trace that gives us a glimpse into what someone did in the days, or in this case, the years after someone allegedly committed such a horrible crime. And Holly Sheppard, in this case, appears to have gone on presenting herself as if nothing had happened at all. We found 3 different Facebook pages that Holly Sheppard regularly posted until she was put into custody. Now, it's unclear how many other people she babysat for between 2018 and 2023. But in both of the cases we're talking about today, again, she advertised herself to moms on Facebook as a babysitter, as a person who could care for even the youngest of children. There is a Facebook group called Cora's Journey that reportedly follows the recovery of that then 2-month-old baby who was nearly killed by Holly Sheppard. The account still talks about the amount of recovery she now has to go through. She's now a toddler, but she appears to have issues with her hearing and with her oxygen levels. Ahead of Sheppard's life sentence, the account posted back in 2024, quote, "Tomorrow is the day we sit in that courtroom reliving all the trauma like it happened yesterday. All the horrific memories and feelings flood back as we sit and listen. Tomorrow, we will be able to stand up against evil and be Cora's voice. We deserve justice for Cora and Willow." Willow is the name of the baby who died in 2018. "I pray our justice system does right by us, that the judge hears everything that is said, that he feels the pain of our family through the victim impact statement that I will read. I pray that God will give me all the strength to get on that stand and read what I wrote in front of that person. I ask Cora's prayer army to pray as much as you can for our family tomorrow." Then on June 17th of this year, after the announcement that Sheppard was charged with the murder of that baby in 2018, the account posted a picture of one of Sheppard's mugshots and said, quote, "Justice for baby Willow is finally happening." Again, Holly Sheppard in that case is still accused and innocent until proven guilty. Police released a statement to KOKH TV that called Sheppard inexcusable and represent a profound betrayal of the trust placed in someone responsible for a child's care. Joining us now to break down this story and all the layers to it is Professor of Applied Forensics at Jacksonville State University, Joseph Scott Morgan. Thank you as always for joining us on Law and Crime. This is an emotional story, whether you're a parent or not, just to see the years it took for Holly Sheppard to officially be accused of this crime related to the death of a 22-year-old baby in 2018. In both cases, the doctors at the hospital said that this wasn't an accident, the head trauma that this baby saw. And particularly in the 2023 case, because she's already been convicted of that. How do you, as a medical examiner, when you're looking at a child, in the 2-month-old's case, how can you determine that the head injuries that they're having, that it wasn't an accident?
Yeah, that it's non-compatible. There's something that they saw at that particular time that is kind of what is referred to as a direct energy injury, where they probably, since they're calling this non-accidental, felt like that there was one focal area on this child's uh, scalp that you had energy directed at that location specific. Because look, Chris, let me tell you, I've worked a lot of cases where kids have in fact died accidentally, and unfortunately many more where we have homicidal events that take place. And there's a distinct difference um, between an accidental event and a homicidal event. You can't really look at an injury and say that there's intent. However, in certain circumstances, these injuries might be atypical. Like if you're being given a description at the scene where a caretaker says, "Yeah, well, the baby fell." Well, let's define fall. You have to go back out to the scene. You have to examine the surface that the child allegedly struck, and you're going to be looking for, particularly if it's a rough surface, you're going to look for like an abraded area over that little focal area. Maybe they hit on a rough surface. That does happen. I've got kids. I've got grandkids. Kids fall. All right.
Yeah.
But if you've got an injury that, say, for instance, is on the top of the head, for instance, uh, you shouldn't see a baby necessarily fall like that. So a lot of it goes to orientation, right? And remember, the first child, the where this individual has been investigated for homicide, this baby is literally days old. Okay, uh, when you're talking about a days old baby, this is a child that you will commonly swaddle. They're going to require your constant attention, and you're going to hold on to them. Correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that out of the case, out of 18,
Mhm.
this baby was with this individual for multiple days. Is that correct? I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, to our understanding, in 2018, when the mom was looking out, and I'm not really sure the circumstances, maybe she was headed back to work, but she had to be this 22-day-old baby, so incredibly young, was put in the care of Holly Sheppard for multiple days at a time. And then this baby is brought to the hospital, and there's still some questions based off of news reports back from 2018, and this was covered, where she was never charged. And that's kind of a big question
Yeah,
is she's now been charged. It took such a long time. And unfortunately, this terrible incident from 2023 led police to be able to link the two cases together to this one person. But that's a big, I think that's probably the biggest question I have that we'll be following as this case continues
yeah,
on is
yes,
why wasn't she charged back in 2018? What was the family dynamic there? I did find it interesting that the line that we're hearing from police through local media outlets was that because of the manner of the injury and the 2023 case with this 2-month old Cora, who did survive, the manner of the injuries there, and they probably knew Holly Sheppard was somewhat involved in 2018. It wasn't just a name that just popped out of the air, but they were able to link the two, they say, because of the injuries. How can you do that and present that in court
well,
when she will
yeah,
potentially face these charges?
yeah. We look for patterns, don't we? And I'm not just talking about injury patterns here, Chris. I'm talking about patterns of behavior many times, particularly the police that are investigating these. So if you have similarities and then you have an individual that, again, gives you the same story, and this would require you retroactively to go back. If she's on the radar, they'd have to retroactively go back and take a look at those statements from 2018. What did she say prior? And this is fascinating to me because it seems as though that there are eerie similarities between what had happened in 18 and what had happened in 2023 in the action and the result here. Uh, and what the tragedy of this is that, and I'm sure that it's nauseating for investigators, uh, if they had hooked her up in 18, might not be in the situation with 23.
Right.
That's very, very sad, to me. And here's another thing that I think that listeners ought to think about. Oklahoma is very well known for having a very sophisticated state medical examiner's office. They don't have a coroner. So, and they really popped onto um, the national spotlight with Oklahoma City bombing because they're broken down like into districts. Okay, so they have a central area that they are focused solely on medical legal death investigation. I'm curious as to what they would have seen at the autopsy in 2018. I'm hoping that there was in fact an autopsy. I'm assuming that there was, because in most states, if you have a child that young, and particularly if the clinicians are throwing around terms like, non-accidental trauma, that child is going to be examined as quickly as possible by the medical legal authorities. What did they find?
In the 2023 case, you can see, according to police, she was just lying from the beginning that they got to the house. The first story she
Yeah.
gave was that she laid the baby down in the crib, this 2-month-old, and the baby just started having seizures. The baby didn't, according to the mom, ever have birth defects. Clearly, when this baby is brought to the hospital, a baby in a crib isn't going to end up having the type of head
No.
trauma that doctors said that she had. How do you go about, because her story then changed and suddenly it was, oh, I tripped on my son's toy and I dropped the baby then I dropped the baby twice. How do you go about taking that story that is a lie, but then trying to figure out what exactly happened?
You take her into the interview room and you begin to press her on this narrative, multiple narratives, by the way, that she's given, and then see how that marries up with the factual information. The biggest piece of evidence here, and I'm not being disrespectful because this is the way we view it, the biggest piece of evidence here that you have is this precious little angel. And, how do these injuries marry up? You're saying the child just spontaneously started to seize or was in some kind of distress in a crib. I've never seen a child suddenly develop a head injury by just lying in a super safe area in a crib, per se. Everything's soft. You're not supposed to have anything in there with a baby. We've all heard it if you're a parent. Well, how does this present? And immediately you're going to change your story, which for me is a huge red flag, because you should be, as just a citizen that's involved, you should be so laser focused on what they're asking you at this point. We're talking about an injured child, that your facts ought to be right on the money. And she's changing this multiple times. So it's going to make me want to do a deeper dive. And, this child, fortunately, is not deceased, unlike the child back in 18. I'm going to go and begin to speak to, as an investigator, I want to speak to all the clinicians that came in contact with the child. I'm going to talk to the child's parents. And I want to take a look at, as an investigator, I want to have a professional radiologist take a look at all of the imaging that was done, because this child survived, but is greatly physically compromised now, probably for the rest of this child's life, Chris. So I'm going to want to go back and take a look at the imaging, just to see what the cause and effect element is here. And then, as an investigator, I'm going to go back and I'm going to pull those 2018 files, and we're going to do compare and contrast at this point in time.
One part I thought was interesting was how police, they bring her back. So she says this story, oh, I tripped on my son's toy and I fell, and then they say, okay, reenact it for us. So they bring her back into the room, and the story, from reading the police report, this is where things are really unraveling for her. In those situations, when you have someone reenacting what they say happened, typically what do you know as an investigator that she doesn't?
Well, first off, that there's going to be, that you've already got a case where there's inconsistencies in the story. So just intuitively, as an investigator, you're going to watch not just what's coming out of her mouth, but you're going to see, you're going to even look at body language with her, and particularly if she is trying to reenact this, does she change movements? And also, you're going to ask her to repeat this several times, because first off, they're getting this on camera. Secondly, you want to see if the narrative changes. An interesting thing that we do for years, that we've done, and I used to do it working as a death investigator in Atlanta, Chris, I would actually carry kind of a lifelike infant doll. And if I was at the scene and I had had a parent that was telling me a story. The body's already been removed from the scene. I would actually ask them, here, let's pretend, this is the baby. Show me what happened. And when you give them that utility, uh, they have to reenact it. And you want to see if their narrative is matching up physically with not just the injuries, but their movements in this thing.
One thing that stood out to me too in this police report, so she ends up pleading guilty. So it's a blind plea that she entered. She received 25 years to life in Oklahoma related to this 2023 case. And she had this changing story over and over and over again. Are you able, as an investigator, to tell whether she struck, and I don't know if she ever did, and maybe we'll never know what actually happened inside that home, but that she struck the child or that the child hit the floor? Are you able, through science, to be able to determine whether or not that happened?
Uh, yeah, to a certain degree, it's kind of limited. However, there's a certain response, a trauma response that you have on anybody's body. We're not just talking about a baby. There's a certain trauma response that you have, let's say, from being struck with a closed hand, um, as opposed to being dropped from a height. What Scientifically, what you're going to want to look at to see is from what height did the child fall. Now, we understand this kind of delivery of injury, so you're going to have a different trauma response. Let's just talk about the fall. You're going to have a different trauma response if a child falls say a foot, from a height down, as opposed to 3 feet to the floor to 4 feet. And also, here's something else that you can't really compute in here, but was the child just kind of passively dropped, okay, and gravity, took hold, or was there energy behind it where the child is not merely dropped, but almost thrown at the ground? I've seen that actually happen before, and it might be from the same height, but those injuries are going to be markedly different, Chris.
This story is just, it's chilling.
Very
You look at her
sad.
pictures, she's smiling in her mugshot for, in
Yep.
Oklahoma. And that's always just, chilling's always the word I think of when you think of someone accused of that you would ever smile in a picture that's going to be put out in public, even if you're going to be behind bars forever. But you contrast that mugshot with a line in the 2023 police report that when she was reportedly told that this child was being airlifted to Oklahoma City from Kay County, Oklahoma, that she was stone-faced. She had no emotion when she was told that. I know you deal in a lot of science, and body language can sometimes be in the eye of the beholder, but what stands out to you just about her? And I guess, have you ever seen a story like this?
I've never seen a story, and that's I'm glad you opened that door, because this is a scary thing for me, man. We're talking about 2018. Let's do the math. You got a 5-year gap here.
Yeah.
What are the children has she had contact with in that period of time? Are there kids that we don't know about out there? It's very interesting that she jumped on a plea, to kind of put this to bed, because it seems as though at least she has this vocationally in her mind, that she's some type of au pair or babysitter or whatever notion she might have. Have there been other kids she's had exposure to? And if so, are there parents out there that had unexplained injuries, with their kids where she had contact? This is not, in my opinion, a one-off event. You've got repeated behavior here. If you believe what we're hearing about 2018, and then you jump forward to 23, the most important thing here are these babies that are out there, those kids that might be affected by this these many years.
Yeah, and it's so important because even though that she's behind bars right now for likely the rest of her life, I mean, a possibility of parole at 25 years, still a long time. She advertised herself as a babysitter, on Facebook post 2018, and that is terrifying. I found 3 Facebook pages that she had, made it seem like everything was all right in the world. And I know nothing probably surprises you anymore, but what's your reaction typically when you see people who are accused of these type of crimes? But then you look, and I know social media, it only shows a little bit of what life is, but it just, to think of the guilt a normal person would live with post 2018, if everything police is saying is true. Does that ever surprise you anymore when you see people kind of go back to living a regular smiley life and even go back to this type of pattern of, in her case, babysitting?
No, because it's almost as if they have a taste for it. And maybe, I don't know. And again, this is completely speculative on my part, but maybe an individual like this would, again, think that they are sufficient to the task when you have to take care of little ones. But there's this kind of rage that's inside of them. Um, when a child is sick, when you can't comfort the child and you've got a short fuse, that's a dangerous mix, Chris. And in this case, it wound up being fatal. And for this other precious little angel from 2023, that baby's health is compromised probably for the rest of their life. That's why I urge anybody that's relying upon social media for childcare, tread carefully. Be very, very careful, because you don't know who's going to come across your threshold at your home.
Yeah, and this story is certainly a terrifying lesson of that. Joseph Scott Morgan, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.